What does it cost to buy property in Costa Rica outside of the cost of the actual property? Today, I'm getting back to basics. It's been a while since I've been able to provide some simple real estate info, so I wanted to cover closing costs, including everything from commissions to escrow fees to inspections today. Stay tuned. Greetings from Latitude 10 Realty, Costa Rica, here in Playa Junquial, Guanacaste. My name is Matt Rosenstiel. Today I'm getting back to basics and providing some simple information about real estate in Costa Rica. This was the original format for every single one of my videos. I got on and blabbered about something very boring related to real estate, and I want to pick up where I left off and get back to that tradition today with a quick overview of what it costs to buy property in Costa Rica outside of the costs of your property itself. We'll cover the closing costs, which are public notary fees and taxes. Next, we'll go over commissions. We'll cover escrow fees and inspections. We'll try to keep things as efficient as possible. If you do like straightforward information about Costa Rica and you're thinking about moving here, do be sure to subscribe to my channel and email me at matt@lat10realty.com. Without further ado, let's cover the closing costs for a property here in Costa Rica. Simply put, the two main components of closing costs, which are public notary fees, or rather the attorney fees, and taxes associated with a transfer, total 4% of your closing price. It's that easy. Just think of that round number of 4% to start off with your closing costs for a real estate transaction, at least currently in Guanacaste as of June 2021. Obviously, this is all subject to change and it's not legal advice. That 4% can be divided a number of ways between buyer and seller. Frequently in our area, around Tamarindo here in western Guanacaste, we'll see evenly split deals where each party pays 2% and 2% of those costs. We might also see that the buyer covers the entire public notary portion of that 4%. Why would they do that? Well, the public notary, the closing attorney who actually executes the transfer, is chosen by the buyer here. They have that right, and they represent the buyer's interests. So at the closing table, if you have that closing attorney, they're representing the buyer, and you can easily argue that the full percentage for their fees, which is about 1.25 to 1.75 of that total 4%, should be allocated to the buyer. So you will see some folks who say, okay, you pay the notary fees and I will be willing to split the remaining 2.5% more or less that are your transfer taxes and stamps, which are just another kind of tax here that are little things you put on official documents. Let's move on to commissions. First of all, as a buyer, you won't necessarily need to be concerned with this whatsoever. In our real estate market currently, commissions are almost unanimously the responsibility of the seller. You would see very few transactions in which the buyer is expected to pay their representative a commission, outside of a lot of weird real estate deals with, so-called comisionistas, or, sort of informal transactions that we can see frequently here. Sellers are paying usually 6% of the closing price plus an applicable tax. As realtors here, we're obligated to charge 13% on our commission and pay that money to the government every month, just like you would pay the sales tax from a restaurant, etc., immediately to the government every month in a monthly filing. So that actual total in a 6% plus tax commission sale can mean that the seller is paying a total of 6.78%. That sales tax adds an additional 13% of the full commission to be 6.78. You will see at times that, especially for higher end transactions, multi-million-dollar homes, etc., the percentage can drop a little bit. In sole brokered transactions or those high-end deals, you might see 5% or even perhaps a bit less. But really the industry standard right now is a 6% commission paid to the realtors by the sellers and split evenly in the circumstance that one party represents the buyer and another agent the seller. Let's go on with escrow fees. A lot of people might have heard of days in Guanacaste when you didn't use a third-party escrow service. I very much feel that it is absolutely past the time to do that unless you have very simple transaction happening. For example, if you're buying a small piece of property directly from a Costa Rican, you might have a bank closing where you literally meet at a bank to sign a check while they sign the closing documents, hand over the money to their bank cashier, etc. But in every other circumstance, and I would say in pretty much every real estate transaction that I'm involved with, a third-party escrow service is needed, and it's a great way to protect yourself. They usually have a floor of a $650 fee for their services, meaning if you're doing a transaction of purchasing something under a couple $100,000, I would expect the minimum fee to be about there. Again, at least here as we stand in 2021. If it's not $650 floor, the next charge would be 0.25% of the total transaction value with some variation. There are different providers available and a lot of different options. But what I see most typically is 0.25% as long as you're above $650 as that floor. That's another fee that can also be split evenly between buyer and seller in the contract, or you might see sellers often say, well, look, the escrow company is protecting the buyer's interest. You're the one who gets to pick which escrow service we're working with, so you go ahead and pay that fee. I'm not going to split it with you. Finally, let's go over inspections. In the case of an undeveloped property, you're just buying land, or in the case that you're buying a home with some property, the first inspection I highly recommend that you get is a survey report done by a licensed topographer here in Costa Rica. That can usually run you about $500 to $600 for an average sized property, and even if you fully trust that the developers have done a good job, even if you know in your heart that the seller has their boundaries clearly marked and everything should be okay, it can be an easy way to absolutely ensure the integrity of the transaction in your property just by paying that $500 to $600 and getting a report done to ensure the boundaries are exactly where they are and no one's encroached, etc. Second of all, obviously, if you're buying existing construction, you can get a home inspection done either by a Costa Rican licensed civil engineer. In our area, there are also US and Canadian licensed contractors who were inspectors back in their respective countries. Their services are available as well. Inspections can run from $500 to $1,000 depending on the level of reporting you get, the level of certification that contractor might have in the US, Canada, etc. And I would say that really between $500 and $1,000 covers you from your typical 2-bedroom condo all the way up to a larger, let's say 5 or 6 bedroom home in that $1,000 range. And if you're looking at something much bigger, obviously the sky might be the limit on inspections, but every dollar is going to be worth it to be able to get people in there and closely look at your investment. Outside of that, if you're a buyer thinking of purchasing property here in Costa Rica, we talked about the closing costs at 4%, commissions being covered by the seller, escrow fees being 0.25% of the total transaction, inspections costing $500 for the topographical survey and $500 to $1,000 for the home inspection. The only other costs you might see would be if you decide to incorporate and own the property through a Costa Rican LLC. If you do that, your cost will run about $1,000. That's just a cost based on a law firm that I typically work with here in Guanacaste, and again, as of 2021. So you're looking at, in the case, let's say, of a split offer where you decide to evenly split all of the closing costs and escrow fees with the seller, you'd be looking at 2.125% of the closing price as part of the primary closing cost for you, plus another $2,000 to $3,000 in flat costs for your home inspections and topographical survey and possibly that corporation. Thanks very much for watching today. Do be sure to subscribe to my channel. I've enjoyed having you here more than you know. Take care and pura vida.